Marinaro, the Sick Podcast. Very eventful day today with the Montreal Canadiens and a Zoom call in which General Manager Kent Hughes and Center Kirby Dach actually attended because the Canadiens announced that Kirby Dach signed a 4-year deal the way our insider, who's going to join us today, Eric Engels, told us that he would. Information on Kirby Dach. The Canadiens say they're betting on him. He's betting on the Canadiens. This sounds like a pretty good deal as they enter year 3 or year 4. The Canadiens should be getting their money's worth. There's no doubt about it. Where does he fit into the equation? We also found out some news on Sean Monahan, Jonathan Drouin, and some very important news that we all suspected regarding Montreal Canadiens goaltender Carey Price. We're talking Habs right here on the Sick Podcast. I'm Marinaro. Joining me, Eric Engels from Sportsnet.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast with Tony Marinaro. The sickest Montreal Canadiens podcast.
And now a 24th Stanley Cup banner will hang from the rafters of the famous Forum in Montreal. The Canadiens win the Stanley Cup.
Sports entertainment like no other. Brought to you by 8.6 Beer, intense by nature. And La Cage. If the last time you went to La Cage was when the Habs won the Cup, it's time you went back to La Cage. The menu will surprise you.
Live from Spain. As a matter of fact, I've been here for almost 2 weeks. So if the internet isn't as stable as it is back home, you'll please excuse me. And I'm not wearing my sick attire today. I left it at home. But it's brought to you by 8.6 Beer, intense by nature, the beer for those who follow their instinct and live their passions in order to make their mark, and brought to you by La Cage. And speaking of which, I want to let you know that the Sick Podcast, which has been getting sicker and sicker and sicker in the last year and a half or so, is going to take another step forward and get even sicker. The Sick Podcast with myself, Tony Marinaro, is about to get a whole lot sicker. Join us at La Cage de Carey on Saturday, October 1st at 7 p.m. for the big news. That's on Rue des Jockeys, and you're going to have to call to RSVP. Do so, because if you wait, you're going to be out of luck. And so on that note, I bring in our guest from Sportsnet, Eric Engels. What's going on?
Tony, you're not wearing the T-shirt, but you're still sick, buddy.
Yeah, I am in many ways, actually, because I got a runny nose, so I'm sick a couple of ways. But Kirby Dach signs a 4-year deal, and I think it was several days ago, Eric, that you hinted at it via Twitter, saying don't be surprised if Kirby Dach signs a 4-year deal somewhere near the $3.5 million a year mark, and he signed for almost $3.4 million. It's close enough for me, Eric. If there were ever any doubts, Eric Engels is a Habs insider. There's no doubt about it. Eric, good for you. What do you make of the deal, and what do you make of the term?
Well, it's funny, you said it kind of in your intro to the show here, and I'm hearing it a lot, that this could be a really good deal in years 3 and year 4. And that's obviously with the caveat that if you only signed a 2-year deal, the number might be a little bit lower in terms of an annual average salary. But I keep looking at the numbers and say to myself, I looked at 9 players who played as many games as Kirby Dach last year, at least 70. And those players make between 3.2 and 3.5 million bucks. If you had to guess what the average point production was for those 9 players, forwards, what would you guess that it is, Tony?
35 points.
Pretty close. 32 points. Dach had 26 last year. So if he scored 6 more points, he's at an average point production of what forwards like him are making in the NHL. So if that happens in year 1, which I think is a pretty reasonable expectation, that he could score 6 more points than the 26 he put up in 70 games last year, are we calling it a good deal in year 1?
I would say so. And, one of the contracts I look at is this Barry Kotkaniemi, who signed a deal, I believe, a long-term deal at about $4.8 million. And so to get Kirby Dach under 3.4, I think Kirby Dach compares to Jesperi Kotkaniemi, and I think he can outproduce Jesperi Kotkaniemi when Jesperi Kotkaniemi was a Hab, of course.
Yeah, I mean, I look back at Kirby Dach coming into the NHL and what the promise was there. Obviously, injury slowed him down. Obviously, the way he was used in Chicago and the turmoil on and off the ice with the Blackhawks was a factor in his production and his slowness to reach his potential, or yet to reach his potential. He obviously played a role in it too. He didn't play to his potential. He's a young player. He's inexperienced, and that's part of the process, as we've seen with several players, and specifically players for whatever reason drafted third overall in the NHL. But, I think we all saw what this kid could be before he busted his wrist at the World Juniors. And I think he still believes that's the potential that he has. The Canadiens clearly believe it. Otherwise, they wouldn't have shipped the picks over to Chicago and traded Alex Romanoff to acquire the picks. And I look at the deal and say, in year one, it could be good value if he reaches the average point production that a player between 3.2 and 3.5 million produces in the NHL at current. With the cap going up, it has a risk of looking like a home run of a deal for Montreal. And it's not like, it's all this huge concession to the Canadiens, because look at it from Doc's angle. He gets the security of a 4-year deal. He gets at least $3 million in the bank. He hasn't produced to the point he's being paid for potential at this stage. He gets to be a restricted free agent coming out of the deal with arbitration rights and 1 year away from unrestricted free agency, where the options available to him will be a short-term deal, and then he could choose wherever he wants to play, or a long-term deal with the Canadiens because he's hit it and is making a ton of money with the inflation of the salary cap and with his production. So, I think it has the potential to be a good deal in year one, a very good deal in year two, and a really good deal in years 3 and 4. Do I think he'll regress from where we've seen him, in his first 3 years in Chicago? It's a possibility. I wouldn't bet on that. I think in Marty St. Louis' system, I think with the players he'll be playing with, yes, the Canadiens are a couple years away from being competitive. Do they have a forward group that can produce a lot more than what we saw last year? I believe they do. And I just think with something to prove and with people placing bets on him and believing in him and giving him this contract, I think there's a much stronger chance that he hits it than if he flops.
You talked about Marty St. Louis, and the Canadiens had awesome coverage of the draft, took us behind the scenes. And one of the things we saw was Kent Hughes actually pick up his iPhone and say, call Kirby Dach, and then says, Kirby, we're really excited to have you. Been working on this deal pretty much nonstop for the last 48 hours. And you're gonna love the coach. You're gonna play offense here. You're gonna play a lot. And then he went on to say, we just drafted a guy who's actually even bigger than you. So the Canadiens, and they brought it up on a couple. Let's hear from Kent Hughes, actually, because he brought up a very important point. Let's hear from him from earlier today.
Well, listen, we've done like just about every trade that we've done. Before we do it, we take the time to do our due diligence and understand the player and as a player, but also as an individual. And we're comfortable with who Kirby Dach is as a human being first and foremost, and what his potential is. There's no such thing as being 100% certain in this business. But we believe he's got a lot of potential, and we believe in this environment with our group, with our coach, with our development group, and the character of the locker room, that this is a better environment for Kirby Dach. And in that environment, we're comfortable that he's going to achieve good things in the Montreal Canadiens organization. Do we know 100%? No, but we do believe that we're prepared to bet on it.
If you listen very carefully, Kent Hughes, every time he talks about some of his offensive players, he talks about their development coach and he talks about their development team. They're really convinced that Adam Nicholas and his group are going to help pretty much every single forward on this team.
Yeah, they are. But, it's not just Nicholas and that group and the skills development that they've brought in. It's the way they're operating as an organization. I think we talked about this a couple times ago that I came on your podcast, that there's some congruence here between the different departments. Everybody's kind of on the same page. And if you're Kent Hughes and Jeff Gordon, how are you not going to believe what you put in place here in terms of that aspect, the analytics aspect, the different people coming in around development, like Marie-Philippe Poulin, who will work with players, maybe not Kirby Dach, but a player like Slavkovsky, who might not spend the entire year in the NHL. We'll see where that goes. But I'm just saying, if anybody's going to believe in it, it's these guys. They've made these installations, made development the top priority of the team, as they should, considering where the team is at and where the roster is at and what their plan is long-term here to build a sustainable, successful hockey team. And I just think, Marty St. Louis offered amazing evidence of how far along they are in terms of growing their development department. He's a huge part of it. Hiring Stefan Robida versus going out and getting a former NHL coach, like they may have tried to do. There were some rumblings that Marty St. Louis was interested in hiring David Quinn before he signed on in San Jose. But, all that said, he was looking at it from a development standpoint. So Stefan Robida comes in on defense, with what looks like not a lot of experience, but a lot of experience in development. So this is what the Canadians are banking on. And I think they look at all their young players that they're bringing in, whether the prospects that Kent Hughes traded for, whether it's Ty Smilanic and the Toffoli deal or whoever you want to pick, in the Florida deal from Sherratt, or, go down the list of the different players, whatever it is. I just think they believe in what they're building here and that they're giving these young players an opportunity to succeed. Now, we're going to see what the proof is as the season rolls along, as they go in with a young defense core, as they go in with young forwards. How will they scale back? How will they say, okay, this kid needs to take a step back, go to the AHL for 20 games. It'll be interesting to see how they navigate those situations.
Yeah, or they didn't need to hire an experienced assistant coach if you think about it, because, they won't say this openly, but if that assistant coach would have helped them pick up a few more points in the standings, probably would have been counterproductive towards what the plan is actually going to be. I think they've said it already that, are they at the point right now where they're better than a lot of teams in their division and in their conference, and they know they're not just yet. So the way to get better long-term and to sustain it is to make sure that you draft accordingly. You have the best chances of drafting a better player, of course, when you pick top 5, and you develop accordingly. So that's their plan. They're following through on it. Speaking of following through, we were waiting to get an update on Carey Price, but I think we pretty much already had it already. It didn't look good for Carey Price. Last time Kent Hughes spoke to us, to the media, he had told us that he didn't see a path for Carey to actually play this season. And today he confirmed that Carey Price is on long-term injury reserve. So if you're wondering if the Canadians are over the cap for now, it doesn't really matter. No surprise, I guess. Hey, Eric?
No surprise. And, I think we're all eager to speak to Carey, and that will happen as training camp unfolds, and he'll meet with Kent Hughes and at least one doctor up on the podium to explain exactly where Carey's at in the process. What we can say for sure is he's not going to play this year. At any point this season, you are not going to see Carey Price. Whether or not he decides at some point this year that he's not done playing hockey and wants to give it one more run with a surgery that won't guarantee that he could come back.
After a year off at age 35, if I can.
Yeah, and after 2 years off, really, because he played 5 games last year on a knee that wasn't good enough to really get him through anyways. So it's a huge decision. It rests solely with Price. If he decides that he wants to make a move to return, and again, nothing guarantees that he'll be able to, even if he has a procedure, because as we know, go back 2 summers, he had a procedure, a similar one to the one he would need, and it didn't do the trick. So I don't know what the future holds for him. I've said it before and I'll say it again. If Carey Price wants to play hockey again, I really hope he can do it. I always want to see athletes be able to call their own shot, and I can't think of somebody else who deserves to be able to do it more than Carey Price. But what we know for sure, and we can stop asking about it, is Carey Price is not going to play the 2022-23 season, and the Canadians have made it so that it would be impossible from a cap and financial perspective.
It sounds like Sean Monahan, Jonathan Drouin, Paul Byron, to name a few, were all nursing injuries as well. There's no guarantee that they're going to start the season on time when the Canadians play the Toronto Maple Leafs on the 12th of October. But what it does look like is that they're not going to miss a lot of time. Right? Kent Hughes says that he expects them to be back early on in the season if they're not there at the start of the season.
Yeah, and we'll see, right? Like, I think we've learned, especially over the last year with the situation with Joel Edmondson, who got hurt on the first day of training camp, and we kept hearing, oh, he'll be back in a couple of weeks, and oh, he'll be back in 3 weeks, and then he'll be back in 2 months, and then he just wasn't back until halfway through the season, or however long it took for him to get back into games. When you have players that have, lingering injuries like Paul Byron specifically, you hope for the best, and he has full intentions. His training is to come back. and expects to be able to play. So I think it was important for Ken Hughes to mention that from a cap perspective, because the opportunity to put him on long-term IR and clear more space, or at least some flexibility for the Canadians, is not there, knowing that he will likely return and probably soon into the season, if not to start the season. Sean Monahan, I thought it was smart what Ken Hughes said about the fact that, last time he had hip surgery, it was supposed to be a 6-7 month recovery, and he was back on the ice after 4, and it may have delayed what was a full recovery for him and impacted his play. Now, Monahan had surgery a little earlier in the summer and should be on target to start the season on time. And Hughes has told him, don't rush to do it. Whether it's a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever it is, you'll be a part of our group when you're good and ready, and make sure you're at 100%. There's no pressure for the Canadians. You outlined it pretty well in terms of where they stand and what they're trying to achieve this year. They're not going into the tank, but they're certainly not going to be crying about the opportunity to draft in the top 5 of what's expected to be a really good draft, and perhaps first overall. And when it comes to Drouin, we've seen what this injury is that he had. He had the other wrist done, a couple years back, and now had this one done. And he's on target, and he was on the ice today. I saw him in Brossard, and he looks good. Whether or not he's ready to play right away, we'll see. But if he is, great. If he's not, it'll take a week or two. And you hope for all 3 of them, that they can come back and play to their ability. Specifically, I think in Drouin's case and Byron's case, and Monahan. I shouldn't specify, because all 3 of them are in need of some redemption in the NHL. And Byron, more so probably than the other 2, just really was pure injury situation that he wasn't able to be the type of player we've seen in his first few years in Montreal. So, hoping for all 3 of them to be back as soon as possible. It sucks being injured in the way they have been injured, and it's good news for the Canadians.
All right, okay. In ending, if we can, considering that Kirby Dach had that wrist injury that you talked about, and he had the surgery, and he struggles in the face-off circle, would you, and we'll have plenty of time to talk about this, but right now, if I ask you today, would you put him on a line with Sean Monahan so that Monahan can insulate him in the circle? Monahan could actually take the face-offs, because Monahan has played both center and wing. Or would you make Kirby be a centerman, Monahan be a centerman, Dvorak be a centerman, and Suzuki be a centerman?
I don't know what I would do, but I have a feeling we're going to see kind of a rotation up the middle. I think Nick Suzuki's locked in there. I think Christian Dvorak is locked in there. The other 3 guys, Dach, Monahan, and Evans, I think you'll see a rotation based on what the needs are, what the injury situation is, and who fits well on what line. If I'm the Canadians, I'm giving Kirby Dach real good line mates. I think the offensive potential is much higher than what he's shown in Chicago through his first 2 years in the NHL. From Monahan, he can return to form, but not to the form that we saw a couple years ago. He's just been through too much, and I don't think he's coming in here with the expectation that he's suddenly going to put up 60 points and play top 6 minutes. They can mix and match things based on who's performing and who isn't. We talked about players in need of redemption. Christian Dvorak had a really rough first half of last year. He got hurt and then came back, and we finally started to show what he really should be and what we saw from him in Arizona. But if he comes into camp and is lagging off the start, then that's an opportunity for a guy like Monahan to move up. So competition is good. Depth up the middle is good. Ken Hughes said he'd much rather have depth up the middle than a lack of it, and I think he's right about that. You look at the most successful teams in the NHL, think about Tampa specifically over a number of years where they had a lot of centermen playing on the wing. That's an opportunity. It's a great thing if you're Martin St. Louis to have those options available to you versus not knowing who to put in the middle or having to put Byron or Drouin in the middle because you're missing guys like Ducharme was during the COVID era of the Canadians last year. I'm sorry to bring it up. I think everybody would prefer to forget about it, but this is the situation that you hope for as a coach. And this is the situation that Kent Hughes has kind of manipulated here over the summer to create that depth.
All right, Eric, here's the last one for today. Okay. And that is Kent Hughes said that in an ideal world, he still like to trade a player so that he can make some more room on the cap. So shave some of that cap money. but he's not going to end up trading away a player just for the sake of trading away a player. And if he likes a player, he's obviously not going to trade the player. So he said it doesn't have to happen, but it would be good if it could happen. Who do you see it happening with?
Honestly, it's an impossible question to answer right now, but I could tell you what I think will happen between now and the start of the season, which is that one of the forwards in excess here, I think Kent Hughes will have an opportunity to move that player and get something back in return. Maybe it's future considerations. Maybe it's a late pick or another player that could potentially help. I also think, as he mentioned, he'll look at waivers to potentially add to his roster because other teams are in cap crunches and there will be certain players available. And I think that's specifically how he might fill a need on defense with, he's got Edmondson and he's got Matheson and he's got Savard and Weidman. But after that, you're a veteran goes down and you're really young on defense. And we've talked about development and how much they want to insulate those kids. Their best opportunity to potentially continue to do that might be picking up a defenseman through waivers on a minimum salary, but a veteran presence in the NHL. And that's provided they're able to make a move before that to clear out a bit of cap space and create that flexibility that they so desire going into another full season. And with the situation they're in long-term IR with Carey Price and the offseason implication, which we don't want to get into the minutia of that because quite frankly, it's way too boring for your viewers. But not
only that, but I have to go pick up my dictionary and check up what minutia means. But Eric, always a pleasure, and I hope to talk to you soon, bud. Thanks for doing this, man.
It's a pleasure, Tony. I think we'll be talking a lot.
I hope so. All right, it's Marinaro. It's the Sick Podcast, and you can follow us on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's absolutely free. Send us a message. Comment Sick, S-I-C-K, and if you're listening on audio, make sure to give us a 5-star review. That's our way of feeling the love. I apologize if it jammed up every now and then. I'm in Spain. The signal is, the Wi-Fi is not as stable as it would be in Canada, but I should be back home in the next 10 days or so. I really wanted to do this because we had big Habs news, and every time there's Habs news, there's going to be the Sick Podcast with Marinaro. Have a good one. Until next time.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Tony Marinaro on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts. The Sick Podcast is brought to you by 8.6, Intense by Nature, and Lacage. If the last time you went to Lacage was when the Habs won the Cup, it's time you went back to Lacage. The menu will surprise you.